Story 1. Hey guys, I want to thank J Nightmares for sourcing some of these stories. I hope you enjoy. This story takes place last summer in August when I went to visit my friend in another city. I'd been there for one day, and this night we decided to go out for some drinks and then for dinner. While we were walking to the restaurant, dressed to the nines, a couple of men older than us stopped us and asked what we were doing that night. We chatted and then asked if we would be willing to come for a drink with them. After my friend and I, being young and liking the attention, of course, said we would see how we feel, and they said that they would be staying at the restaurant that we saw them outside of, and that their usual table was right next to the patio entrance. We went for our dinner, and as we were walking back, not thinking of these men that we previously encountered, we heard them calling over, and they said, "Just join us for a drink." My friend and I kind of looked at each other, and it was only about midnight, so we decided that we would go and join them for a drink. My friend is hilarious, and we're both really assertive, so she decided to ask for 2 trebles in a shot of expensive tequila. When they asked us what we wanted to drink, they laughed and said how they liked that she knew what she wanted. The drinks came out pretty quickly, but the shots were taking a while, and one of the gentlemen had gotten up and left the table. We assumed to take a call. After a few minutes, the gentleman came back to the table and sat down next to my friend, and the shots came out not long after with the waitress. Not thinking anything of this, my friend and I took her shots, and almost 5 minutes later my friend looked at me and said, "Something's wrong, I don't feel right." My friend in general tends to overreact in some situations, so I brush it off and say, "Don't worry, everything's okay." The next part of the story is not coming from my own recollection, it's coming from my friend's recollection, because unfortunately I don't remember anything from that night. My friend said that I began slurring my words and acting a lot more drunk than I should have been, given the amount that I attract, and one of the gentlemen suggested that they give us a ride home because I wasn't looking so well and I probably drank too much. My friend asked if they'd had a car, because in this big city it's not common to drive around, it's more common to taxi or Uber, and they'd pointed to a Rolls-Royce that had illegally tinted windows and was running with the driver in the front, about 5 feet away from the patio that we were sitting on. And it had been there for about 30 minutes. My friend immediately got a weird feeling, and though she was also feeling kind of loopy and dizzy, she got us both out of there. She said she provided no explanation, and she grabbed me by the arm and started dragging me down the street in a downtown highly populated area while booking an Uber. According to my friend, the entirety of the Uber ride I was sweating profusely, vomiting. I could barely walk, I couldn't speak, my eyes were rolled back, and I was completely incoherent. When asking my friend about how I got so sick and how she didn't, she reminded me that she'd been drinking a lot the night before and wasn't feeling that great, so she only took about a third of the shot because she wasn't able to finish the whole thing because she thought she was going to vomit. Me, on the other hand, and of course I took the entirety of the shot down and clearly got a higher dose of whatever was given the next day. Obviously, I felt like absolute garbage, but needless to say, I think my friend definitely saved us both that night, and it's not just me, from an unknown group of men who had unknown intentions with 2 young drunk girls and then drugged them in the heart of a big city. Story 2. I'm a female, and this happened when I was in junior high school. My grandfather was a youth probation officer, therefore it wasn't unusual to have people he worked with and took care of call at the house with their parents. My grandfather passed away, and a couple of days after his death, a pair of high school boys turned up at their house while I was home alone. I remember one had dyed blonde hair. It looked like he thought of himself as a bit of a bad boy. The other one seemed more mature. "Your grandfather took care of us when we were younger. We're here to pay our respects," the mature one said. I was so impressed that these young guys respected my grandfather that I opened the door and let them straight in without thinking about it. Once inside my home, the young man's attitude quickly changed. One was staring at my body and face, he was eyeing me up. The older boy was looking around our home, he was asking me questions about my family in the house. I showed them the small Buddhist altar in our family home and the photo of my grandfather. They both lit an incense stick and placed it before the altar while the sticks were burning. The young men continued to talk to me in an overly familiar way. "You're pretty cute, you know. How old are you? What school do you go to? Do you have a boyfriend?" The boy with the dyed blonde hair was asking these questions. I was so confused. "Are you home alone today?" He was staring at me like a snake. I felt his eyes all over me. I felt dirty. The other boy was eagerly awaiting my Reply: I knew I was in danger, now was alone with these total strangers, and I could tell they had bad intentions. I think they could see the discomfort on my face. But I think you are home alone, aren't you? No one else is around, are they? Stop it, I said. What's the problem? It's okay, relax. You are just the type of girl I like, blonde-haired boy said as he started to approach me. Remember, he just started grinning at me. I hated it. The other guy was telling him to stop, but he was ignoring it. Then I heard the doorbell. It was one of my neighbors. Hi, it's me from next door, came his voice from behind the door. I'm coming. I showed it as I raced over to the door. I hardly opened the door. I was so grateful that the neighbor was here, even though he just came over to collect some money. The boy started walking to the front door. The blonde-haired one tatted at me. As he got closer, the other boy shouted at him to get out. When the second boy passed me, I saw an apologetic look on his face flash by as he said sorry in a small voice. This was a truly terrifying event, because at that tender age, I thought the world of violence and want the blonde-haired boy's intentions were only lived behind the television screen. I didn't know how close I was to being scarred for lies. Be careful when leaving kids home alone is all I can say. Story 3. I moved into a large studio apartment complex a few months ago. I'm a single female with a 2-year-old daughter. My sister and a few of her friends came over about 3 weeks ago to hang out and some beers and play Cards Against Humanity. My studio has an enclosed patio save for a door-sized opening. Since my child was sleeping, I had everyone chill outside on the patio. We were having a great time joking, talking, and listening to low-playing music when the security guard entered my patio. Hi there, are we being too loud? Has someone placed a complaint? No, you guys are fine, I'm just doing my rounds. I lingered for a minute more and then strolled out into the night. We continued our activities and didn't really give him a second thought. It returned about 25 minutes later, right after most of the group had left. Only my sister, her friend Cody, and I remained. He wasn't overweight, late 40s, early 50s, white male, and he wore glasses. He strolls into my patio once again and strikes up conversation. We learn he's a retired cop that had to quit the force after suffering a heart attack on duty. He states he had to undergo a quintuple bypass surgery, and after recovering he started night security jobs. I felt sorry for him because the medical history, and sat and listened to him for quite a while. He must have stayed at least 30 minutes before my sister got uncomfortable and loudly announced that we were going to bed. He bid us a good night and left. Once inside, my sister said that she didn't like the way he was looking at me and she thought that he took a liking to me. I initially told her she was reading into it too much and that the guy was just lonely and had a long shift ahead. A week and a half later, my sister is visiting again and we're sitting inside my place talking. My studio has a black screen door and a wooden door. I had the screen locked and the wood door wide open to let some air in. My sister's talking to me, and I have the sensation that someone is looking at me, so I glance up. The security guard is standing at the doorway of my patio, staring. I say hello, and he jerks forward, as if expecting an invitation in or something, but I turned my attention back to my sister, and when I glanced back, he's gone. This week on Tuesday, I took a shower and threw on my red silk Japanese-style robe. I was washing dishes for about 25 minutes, and it poured a glass of wine. I turned from the kitchen to sit on my couch and I strangled a scream. The security guard is almost pressed up against my screen door, staring at me through the foot-long crack of the wood door. I was so startled and shaken, but the first thing I did was to make sure my robe wasn't exposing me up to the screen. You scared me. With no emotion and no apology, he said. I was just doing my rounds. My scalp is crawling and I'm still shaky, and I say okay, I'm going to bed now. He's still right up next to the screen door, all the way inside my patio. He turns and looks at my beach cruiser parked against the wall. Oh, you have a buy, you should put it inside because someone could take it, he said. Yeah, I'll get to it, I respond. I pretty much slam the door and lock it. I sit down with the wine and calm my nerves. I was shaken up, but wasn't sure if he was really being a creeper or just a lonely individual that was looking for someone that had expressed interest. After a debate with my friends and sister, I contacted the property manager. I was actually surprised by how quickly it escalated. They took my verbal incident report over the phone and just informed me today that the guy has been fired. The property manager told me to call the police if I see him on premises again. Story 4. When I was in high school, I worked part-time at a local coffee shop one day. This kind of weird, overly friendly guy came in and started talking to me at the register. I wore a name tag with my nickname on it, and he asked if it was short for anything. I said yes and told him my full name. He asked what kind of name it is. My name originates from a Greek name, so I told him that because it's kind of interesting. He asked if I've ever been to the Greek festival in my city. I said no, and he replied with, well, you belong there. Them Greek girls are hot, mind you. At this point I'm 16 and this was a grown man. After that is when things got weird. He would show up to the coffee shop every day and ask my coworkers when I would be coming in or if I was working that day. Eventually he would start sitting at the seat right by the front door waiting for me to come in. One day he physically stood up and blocked my path and asked if he could buy me a coffee. Grabbed my hand when I declined and tried to walk past. To go in the back, he tried to follow me behind the counter and into the back room. He would hang out there for hours just watching me and would try to constantly talk to me. My managers eventually had to tell me to work in the back until he left every day. And then he started sitting in the seat closest to the back room. After that, I had to start coming into work through the back door and staying there until he left. My coworkers had to tell him I quit, hoping he would stop. Then he became obsessed with one of the other girls and the cycle started all over again. He truthfully didn't seem that harmful, except for the time he grabbed my hand, but it was creepy and he was constantly there. The owner of the coffee shop had to file a restraining order in the end because no matter what we did or told him, and it didn't stop, and he was there just watching and waiting. Nothing ever happened after the restraining order. He was allowed in the plaza the coffee shop was in, still just obviously not in the coffee shop and not near the patio by the front door that we usually saw him go to the grocery store until the restraining order. He just disappeared after that. It's very creepy and kind of scary as a 16-year-old. Story 5. This happened back in the 80s, so very much the pre-cell phone era. I was in high school at the time. One night after dinner, my mom suggested we take a walk around the block to walk off dinner. My brother and dad were watching TV and opted to stay home, so it was just us girls. We lived out in the fringes of the suburbs in a subdivision that was semi-rural. By that I mean there were houses but no streetlights or sidewalks. Everyone had septic tanks as there was no sewer service and that kind of thing. The houses were all well back from the road and the lots were wooded. Anyway, we were walking around the block, which is about 1.5 miles in total, and we're almost back home. It's pitch black that night. There was no moon and we had a flashlight to use as needed. Without it you couldn't see much past a foot or two around you. We mainly used it as a signal if a car went by, but there wasn't really anyone around, so we had it switched off and we're just walking and chatting. Just as we turned the corner onto our street, we suddenly heard footsteps behind us. This was a bit weird as we just come from that way and hadn't seen or heard anyone walking on that street or coming down the driveways we passed. But we just figured it with some neighbor also out for a walk and we hadn't noticed them in the dark, so I turned around to look and switched the flashlight on to see who it was. They immediately switched a flashlight on too, so I could only see their light and not them, and they said nothing. We kept walking, but the footsteps behind us sped up. Now they sounded heavy, so we thought it was a man. We sped out. He's better. I turned the flashlight back on and he turned his on again in silence. We were too scared to call out, and now we were approaching our driveway. As we got there, I pushed my mom in front and told her to get up the driveway, which was steep and long. Once she had a start, I sprinted up after her. As I did, the footsteps veered away to the other side of the road and kept going. Nothing was ever said by this person, and normally people here wave and spoke when out walking or even driving by. When we got up to the house, my dad said it was probably just a neighbor, so my brother and I got into my car and drove down the road to see who it was. No one was there. We went all around the roads and no one was walking on them. There wasn't time for him to leave the area. Either it was a nasty neighbor getting off on scaring us and then ducking into a house, or whatever it was came out of the woods behind us and then disappeared back into the Story 6. About 4 years ago, I worked as a laundress. I worked 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and would often walk alone. We usually have a security guard posted near the parking lot, and later in the day they patrol the building. They carry a radio and pepper spray. Anyway, a new guy started, and I never saw him watching over the parking lot. When I came in each morning throughout my shift, he would come into my laundry room. He was talkative, but I noticed he would look in my body a lot when he thought I Wouldn't notice one day I came into work and started putting my stuff away and getting ready. To begin, I hadn't turned on all the lights yet, so there were parts of the room I couldn't see. Suddenly, I hear radio static in the corner of the room, and I see a red radio. I turn on the lights, and the new guy is in the corner of the room hiding and watching me. When I asked what he was doing there, he said he was just hanging out and started laughing. It was obvious he was waiting for me. He ended up doing this so often that I got used to it. I came in early one day and was working in one of our smaller areas. Came into the small rock to me. He's a big guy, so I couldn't get around him. He was just talking to me, but I couldn't move or leave the room because he blocked the door. He asked me why I came in early that day, and I told him it was because I had to leave early later. He told me that I was required to tell him all my hours so we could always know where I am. He was leaning over me and felt like he was trying to upset me. I had this horrible feeling in my stomach that he was about to try something, so I pushed past him and called my supervisor, who said he would keep an eye on him. I told him that I had a bad gut feeling about this guy and that I needed to leave for the day. The next day, he was fired. Apparently he wasn't in the guard tower at the start of the shift because he would spend most mornings in the woods near the parking area recording girls walking in for their shifts each morning. They also found a huge collection of pop and soda cans and coffee cups in his locker that he admitted that he dug out of the various trash cans around where I and the other girls worked. His wife shortly left him and took full custody of their newborn baby. Story 7. So this is an ongoing situation, but it went from annoying to seriously creepy. There's a maintenance guy at the office building I work at. He's hired through the landlord of the building, not our company. His name is Bob, is an older guy, maybe late 50s, and a former heroin addict. I say that, but we're all pretty sure Bob still occasionally indulges in the habit. He's very socially awkward, and his mannerisms and way of speaking are strange. He talks really slow and pauses, and places where pauses don't make sense or trails off from its sentence. He also gets really close when he talks to you and makes intense eye contact or stares at me through our huge front window that happens to be in front of my desk. So overall, a mildly creepy guy. He's done some weird things in the past, like give me his personal number, bought a coworker a $200 wedding gift and had it delivered to her, the staring at people through the window, and he gave me a toy riding horse thing for my son, the kind that's on springs and rocks back and forth, and he asks me personal questions about my marriage and tried to ask me to go on a date with him. I also found my car door open and a bunch of my stuff like paperwork and some perfume and makeup by keeping my center console moved around once when he was here. Today he comes in the front office and just kind of stands there after saying hi. I asked my coworker if I can go out and have a smoke, and she says yes. I go get in my car and keep the door cracked so I could smoke. I was parked under a covered carport thing outside the back door across from the utility and supply room. All of a sudden Bob is standing there and kind of grabs the door and opens it a bit. I don't know where he came from, but I was listening to music, so I wasn't really paying attention. I took my earbuds out and looked at him like what. He doesn't answer right away. He then asks me if I can take him to the store. He has a big white truck that he knows. I know he has he knows damn well I can't just up and leave while I'm working. I tell him that, and he says no, it's okay, I already asked another coworker and she said okay. I asked him why he can't just drive himself, and he stands there for a second looking at me. He asks me to help him with something in the utility room. I say no, and I need to get back in before I get yelled at. He stared for a minute and then smiles the creepiest smile and says, no you won't. But I think you took me to the store, we have plenty of time. I don't know if I'm accurately conveying the creepy scary vibe he was putting off, but I was scared at this point. I didn't know what he wanted or what he was trying to accomplish, but it wasn't anything good. And on top of that, he wasn't moving out of my way, and he was 6 inches away from me. I tell him to move, and he stands there for a few seconds, but then finally moves. I dialed 911 on my cell phone and jumped out of the car and ran inside. And I seriously thought he was going to grab me and push me into the utility room or something. I'm still shaken up about it. Oh, and he didn't ask a coworker anything about the store. He made that up. He left right after the whole thing, and I really don't know what to do about the whole thing. Story 8. When I was in my late sophomore through my junior year of high school, I was diagnosed with insomnia. I would sleep Maybe an hour or two every 24-hour period with sporadic binge sleeping rather randomly anyway being awake at. All time essentially made me alone a lot, so one summer I decided to walk to a gas station near my house to get a Gatorade, or some. It's about 2 a.m. No one is awake in my house, so I just walk out. I'm arriving at the gas station after a pretty uneventful walk, and I'm approaching that glow from the overhead lights, so things on the far edges are visible but illuminated very poorly. The gas station has a really steep drive to enter from the main road, and the other end has a small portal filled parking lot with a narrow little alley that leads to an avenue. As a relative side note, I grew up in a very average middle-class neighborhood, not a suburb, not inner city, and really close to a country town neighborhood than anything else, I guess. Anyway, I start heading towards the front door, and in my peripheral vision something moves in the darkness, so not being very suspicious, I lazily turn to look. I can make out the shape of a person, and they're very rapidly materializing from out of the dark. It's a cat, probably a little older than me, and he's on a pretty fast clip jog. He jogs right up to me and stops about half an arm's length away. We just stare at each other. The weird thing, though, is that his upper lip is essentially shredded. It was like he fell off a motorcycle or something, and he was bleeding. He was also bleeding out of his nose, and his lower left eyelid was drooping down and full of blood. He had a bunch of blood splattered on his white t-shirt too, as if he'd sneezed or something. I began to say something, but before I could utter one syllable, he just moved to my left and kept running without saying a word. I went in, got my drink, and walked home. I was waiting to hear about it in the news the next day. I didn't, so while hanging out with a close friend, I mentioned what had happened. We molded over for a bit, and then he suggested something. He knew it was a wild shot in the dark, but he suggested that the kid didn't exist, and then I just really needed sleep. I hadn't even thought of that until this day. I don't know. Story 9. So I was walking through the town center with my husband. We were just talking about what bills needed paying in that kind of thing. I looked straight in front of me, and there was a man. This was no ordinary man. This was a man whose face is etched in my brain, my memory, a memory I locked away many years ago when I was around 8. My aunt, who had a few learning disabilities, lived on her own. She was not very clean, lived in a one-bedroom flat with around 5 cats. And it stuck. It was dirty, but I used to go help her tidy up and look after the cats. There was a man who lived in the upstairs flat. His name was Chris. Chris also had cats, and his cats had kittens. Chris had befriended my aunt and used to come talk to her. They seemed like good friends, but I didn't like him much. One day while I was there, Chris turned up, and he'd been feeding kittens for most of the night, as the mom cat was rejecting them. He said he was tired, and if he fell asleep, to wake him in 2 hours to feed the kittens. 2 hours went by, and my aunt said we need to wake Chris so we could feed the kittens. My aunt tried to wake him, shaking him. All he did was scramble and sang, "Get away from me, I'm sleeping." My aunt started to laugh, thinking he was joking, and started pulling at his foot. She hit down on his foot and shouted, "Chris, you need to get up and go feed your kittens." All of a sudden he jumps up, no emotion in his face, looked straight towards me, and started to march my way across the room. I tried to run for the door, but he managed to catch me around my neck with his hands, and they got tighter and tighter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted my mom. I thought I was going to die as he raised me off the floor with his hands still around my neck, slowly creeping up the wall. I was 8, around 56 pounds, so I wasn't very big at all, but it was quite petite, and I could feel the life being drained from me. All of a sudden, I felt my body sliding quickly down the wall. I felt a very sharp pain at the top of my leg where it meets your backside, and realized he'd slammed me down on a radiator that was on the wall. With that, he let go, straightened himself out, and said, "And I'm gonna feed the kittens." 19 left. I was crying so hard I just wanted my mom. My aunt just stood there, mouth open. She didn't try to help, she just stood there screaming while he did it. Funny thing is, I know she was screaming, but in a few minutes that it took to happen, it was like silence for me, pure silence. All I could remember is just knocking in Chris's eyes, thinking I'm never gonna see my mom or brothers or sisters again. My aunt rang my mom. She caught a taxi straight to her house. My stepdad came and went to find Chris. He disappeared. No one knew where he was. For 2 weeks my stepdad waited outside the flats, but Chris never came back. Some cat protective people came and got the cats and kittens and took them away. The police showed up as my mom was ringing them, as a neighbor had heard the commotion and rang them. They took off statements and took us home. I had photos taken of my injuries around my neck and just under my backside. I had a big gash from the side of the radiator. I had to have it dressed by a nurse for a while. It turned out okay, but left a scar. CE went to court, and luckily I didn't have to attend because of my age. All he got was 1 year conditional discharge. That it was not justice, it was a joke. I was scared to leave my home. I didn't want to play outside with my friends. My aunt went on to not talk to the family and marry that man I wanted so much to wreck the wedding. I hated it her, then I hated them to the point I cried. Why should they be happy when they stole my light? My light was now dark. It divided a lot of the family. It took a long time for nightmares to stop and the anxiety. He was gonna come finish what he started. I put it away in a box, never wanting to open it again, and there he was, stood right in front of me right there. I wanted to go slap him, beat him up, but I also wanted my husband to just hold me tight and tell me I was okay. As I looked back, he looked at me, but I don't even think he knew who I was, but I certainly knew who he was. As quick as I saw him, he was gone. I stood on my feelings for a few days, but I think it's time to put them back in the box where they belong. Story 10. I matched with Prayer on Bumble some months ago. We got along very well, went on drives. Boutique coffee outlets like Third Wave got a lot of patronage from us as well. Usual late 30s couple, no kids, and significant disposable income thanks to tech jobs in Bengaluru. We both lived relatively far away from each other. We'd stay at each other's place whenever we could. I was married before, and I'm a cat parent who is stray adopted me and my ex-wife some years ago, and since my ex moved to Europe after the divorce, I was left to take care of it for about 2 years. Apu the cat is a sweet, cuddly brown bundle. 2019, just before the pandemic, my ex and I had been to the U.S. to visit her younger sister. A seller in Etsy had listed cat collars for sale, which came with a bow. We'd brought a dozen or so of those collars and brought them back with us. The cat collar with a jingling bell on a Pooh was hilarious. He hated it for a bit, but then he got used to it. Over the past 2 months, the bell on that cat collar started disappearing. But I didn't think much of it. Those colors were bought in 2019. I thought they were going to wear off sooner or later, and since I had about a dozen of them, I would always change the color on a Pooh. But shortly after that, the bell would go missing. Last month, I decided to stay over at Priya's place in Whitfield. She lives by herself in one of those gated villas. I don't worry much for a pool. He does his business in the litter box and knows how to work the cat food dispenser. One thing about Priya, she cannot stand smoking, and I had, for reasons of my own, hadn't disclosed that I do smoke sometimes. So yeah, I was staying in her villa, and it starts raining heavily every day. We don't have much to do stuck indoors. We finish a bottle of Amrut single malt whiskey. The neighboring villas are all flooded. They're pumping water out, and we realize it's only a matter of time before Priya's village will be flooded too. We want to secure the doors as much as we can to stop the water from entering. I asked Priya if she has any old clothes or blankets that we can use so we could create a barricade. A futile attempt, but we were drunk and we wanted to do something. She hands me an old hideous green blanket along with some old beige curtains and t-shirts. We plugged the doors as best we can. We're tipsy and tired. We collapse on the couch. I vaguely remember saying something half funny about the hideous green blanket that was my mother's favorite blanket. After she passed, I would always have it with me whenever I'd have to sleep. But then I remember having it on me when I had a miscarriage. I felt my mother's presence. She said it, and you know what? She hated cats. She continued, so my day doesn't have a mother who hated cats when alive. She believes in the afterlife, and she's had a miscarriage, yet she's held on to that hideous green blanket for God knows how long. The things I realized one rainy, drunken night that I'd never known for months. The perils of modern-day dating. I get this sudden urge to smoke. I excuse myself, lock myself in the bathroom, and open the windows. Once I finished, I threw the cigarette butts into the toilet and flushed. That's what I hear, an oddly familiar sound. I lift the lid off of the toilet tank. I see 4 of a Pooh's cat collar trinkets. I quietly walk out the back door. The streets are flooded. There are no cabs. I book a hotel room on a Agoda app to stay for the night. I block Prius numbers, or I've deleted Bumble. I post cozied up next to me, powering away with no care in this world. As I tied, it's raining again. Hey guys, I want to thank J Nightmares again for sourcing and translating some of these stories. Head over to his channel and check out some of his content. His link can be found down below. If you have a scary story of your own to share and you would like me to feature it on the channel, please send it to the Email in the description, or if you prefer head over to my subreddit r/Stories from Mr. Revlet. It's the stories that keep the channel going. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to my channel members and patrons LJ, Fiona X Fox, Scott I Like, Booty, Monica Level, Ace Chris and Donna, Holly Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Cyanotics, Heather, Haven Kitty, Cat Luna 2, ADHD, Aurora, Janice, Cinderella, Baby Borderline, Betty Lady, Drackert, Erica Nicole, Snowball, Ruthina, Melanie the Honeybee 987, Pretty Girl 215, Brian, Brooke, Wendy, Crafty Cow, Tina, Dina, Vampy, Dabs, Patricia, Amber, Krista, Brenda, Absent, Alice, Christy K, Spiders Web, Ooh Lala, Andrea, So Monique, Sean Gorman, Emma, Lisa, Sigma, Cubax, Greg, Chelsea, Amanda, Jang, Sam, Zept Happy, Sarah C, Austin, Tegan, Lil, Smart, Jenny, Gabrielle, Fire 05, Sarah P, James, Gargano, Gemma, Allen and Alex. I hope you're all doing well, guys. I'll see you all on the next one.